Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Shutter Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Eli Pearl, and today I'm joined by
Julien Rose,
Austin Terry,
Cam Stirling,
and Lucky Roberts.
From the little leagues
to the pros.
This is your weekly sports show.
Welcome to the Shutter Sports Podcast.
Take a seat at the table as we discuss.
On today's episode, we will be discussing the NBA trade deadline. What teams won? What teams lost? What was the biggest surprise? What trades that you suspected to happen didn't go down? Here's how today's episode will work. We will go around the table and answer the biggest questions at the deadline and discuss.
Before we start, it's important to say that everything expressed in this episode is our opinion. Whether you agree or disagree, we invite you to join the discussion on Instagram at ShotSportsMedia or Twitter at ShotSportsM.
Alrighty, let's start with what teams won the biggest at the deadline. So I'll throw it over to you, Cam.
First team I got to go with is probably got to be the Philadelphia 76ers. After Joel Embiid went down, adding Buddy Hield, a prolific shooter in the league that can knock down shots in the clutch, I think that'll help them in their playoff race and eventual team building overall.
Alrighty, so we have the Sixers from Cam. Over to you, Austin.
The winners for me were the New York Knicks again, because last trade deadline they did well as well. But they dealt Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, I don't know how to say that, and Malachi Flynn for 2 second-round picks to the Pistons, which is almost, they gave up almost nothing for Bogdanovic and Alec Burks. They've added two really good players to an already good roster that is in a win-now mode, and they're looking to challenge most likely the Celtics and the Bucks for the East.
Yeah, the Knicks are looking great so far. Over to you, Julien.
For me, it would have to be the Dallas Mavericks. I love the addition of Gafford and PJ Washington. I think they got a great deal with both of them. I think that they are perfect match for Luka's playstyle. PJ Washington could stretch the floor. That's all he needs. And also, they gave back someone with a hefty contract in Grant Williams, wasn't really playing that well. And also Seth Curry dealing with injuries. For me, it's perfect. In the small sample size that we got with their game versus Oklahoma, they were looking really, really good.
Alrighty, so 3 different picks so far, and let's toss it over to Lucky Roberts for our last discussion about what teams won the deadline.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to change up the different picks here. I had the same one as Austin, the New York Knicks. I thought it was honestly a really shrewd move for the New York Knicks, just because they basically gave up 2 second-round picks and Quentin Grimes, who I'm not really the biggest fan of. I know New York Knicks fans thought really highly of him, but he sort of hasn't really developed. And I know going to a team like the Pistons, where they haven't been able to develop their young players, Cade, obviously the exception, but I think really the issue for them is not being able to develop their young guys, and Quentin Grimes is, he's averaging 7 points. He's not really developed, and players like that are really easy to find at 23 years old. And so to get developed guys like Bojan Bogdanovic, Alec Burks, who can shoot the ball, it's going to be a big jump from going from RJ, who can't really shoot it, to those shooters spaced around their already great core.
Alrighty, so we've heard from everybody about who won the deadline. So to open up for discussion, let's go on to the Knicks, the people who we thought, based off of 2 of us, had the best deadline, and in my opinion as well, picking up Bogdanovic was a great move in my opinion. What are some other thoughts?
Also, for just to add on quickly for the Knicks, Grimes already wanted out. So it's like, honestly, best case scenario for both parties here. I love it. Grimes, I would have to agree here with Lucky. Not really, I don't think he's all that, but Pistons, he'll have playing time, so I'm happy for both parties here.
Yeah, the Pistons are in an interesting scenario where they're the worst team in the league by far, and they need to continue to build, and I think Grimes is a great addition to that.
To tag on, although I think the 76ers had the best deadline, I think the Knicks-Pistons trade was the best trade that went on in the deadline. It was absolutely perfect for both teams, and since Knicks are now in a win-now mode after adding OG Anunoby earlier in the season, I think adding 2 15-plus point scorers onto that roster is a really big deal for them come playoff season.
Yeah, the Knicks are looking like an offensive threat, and like you said, in win-now mode. So in a tough East, it's going to be interesting to watch come playoff time to see the matchups and how well this team gels together for that playoff.
Yeah, I think the interesting point now for me is obviously, like they've got OG, they got some really nice wings. They've got the point guard locked down. But how are they, like, if they run into a Joel Embiid in the East, in the 76ers, do they have a big who can really contend to go up against him in the playoffs or not? Because that sort of seems like the hole on their team for now.
I would say, though, that's very, very true. Embiid, for now, he's injured, right?
Yeah.
So not a big concern, but for what we've seen from Hardenstein, although he's not no Mitchell Robinson, obviously, defensively, but he's been amazing for the Knicks. Picked him up in fantasy. Great player. He's stuffing the stat sheet, getting boards. He's getting like 16 rebounds every other day. He's a mobile big. Big body, heavy. He could get
It's okay, second language.
Yeah. Weight-wise, he can match up with the Jokic's if they ever go to the finals, or that's big picture. But I really like what we're seeing from Hardenstein. He has a good in-between game, good screener. That's enough for me. But I'll say I think that they're not too scared with Hardenstein at the 5.
Alrighty, so we've now talked about who we thought won the deadline. I'd now like to discuss who we thought lost the deadline. So what are teams that made some awful picks, even didn't make any picks if we want to bring up, or trades, just stuff like that. So I'll swing it over to Cam.
All right. I am going to talk about the Chicago Bulls for a bit because they have not made a move in 3 years almost. It is an absolute disgrace to have a team like that with a history that they do have, and I just feel for the Chicago Bulls fans watching this team be just perpetually mid for the last few years, and them having another trade deadline that they didn't do a thing, along with like one of their best players, Zach LaVine, being out with injury. I just have no idea where the Bulls are going to go, or the Bulls are going to go.
So before I swing it over to Austin, do we have any other opinions on the Bulls and what happened?
I completely agree with you, Cam. For me, I would just like to add, for them, DeRozan before the season, they offered him something, didn't like it, right? So there's two, and this goes for DeRozan and also Drummond, who's been having an okay season, with the Bulls, probably his best season since leaving the Pistons. So for them, they either have to overpay DeRozan and Drummond if they want them to stay, or they're just leaving for nothing, right? So it's just not looking good at all for the Bulls. They have a very bleak future. The only player I could think of right now is Kobe White, he's good, but he's not no SGA, no Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So yeah, not looking good for the Bulls at all.
And for Lucky to add.
Well, I just think it's really important because we talk about teams that like trade guys with expiring contracts and we say, oh, they didn't get enough back, right, for the players that they are. But it's important to think at least they did get something back because you see time and again in free agency, like I'm talking as a Raptors fan here, seeing Fred VanVleet go for nothing like really hurt, right? Because the amount of value that he brought that we could have gotten at least something, pennies on the dollar, right? But getting nothing for a player like Fred VanVleet, getting nothing for a player like DeRozan, like you said, like Julien said, is just the worst case scenario for any team because now they have to really reset from zero with no value, no starting blocks, which is, you can't do that to your fan base.
Just something else to add is they have guys like Lonzo Ball who looks like their career is kind of over. Like he keeps saying he'll come back from injury. He's one of the best standard point guards in the league, I'd say. He's very good at his fundamentals and he plays his game very well, but it doesn't look like he'll ever come back. So the Bulls need to look to push forward from this. To you, Austin.
Okay, so my loser here was actually Julian's winner, the Dallas Mavericks. I believe, I like the Gafford trade. The Gafford trade was all right. I'm fine with it. It wasn't, the greatest trade ever in my opinion. But the PJ Washington one, it throws some question marks to me because I just feel like his only strength this year is floor spacing. He's 91st in the league for scoring with 13 points per game. He can't rebound. He's 78th in the league as a power forward, and he racks up 2 assists a game, and he's 133rd in the league. That's not who you kind of want to surround Luka and Kyrie with, and I feel like they needed better than PJ Washington to... I mean, Gafford makes up in the rebound department, but I just don't feel like they did enough for Doncic.
So I see some anger on Julian's face, so I think it's time for just a little bit of a face-off. We'll all back off, me, Lucky, and Cam, and just hear from Julien and Austin for a second to settle the beef, winner or loser, on the Mavericks.
I get your point. Now that I think about it, I agree a bit. But what I do have to say is that PJ Washington on the Mavericks doesn't have to do much, right? He could just space the floor. Let Luka, let Kyrie do whatever they have to do to win. He just has to be there, space the floor, knock down his threes. If he could grab some rebounds, yes, I'll admit it, not the best rebounder, but he's still size. He's a mobile defender. And they have Gafford to take the rebounding load. Also, Lively, he's injured right now. Good rebounder, good. He's a young player. But, they're getting a lot. They're getting a lot out of PJ Washington for what they gave up, in my opinion, and I really like it for them. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that, Austin.
Yeah, they didn't get fleeced whatsoever in it, so I'll give them that at least. But the Dallas Maverick roster is average. They have their two studs in Doncic and Kyrie, and other than that, I feel like they need that one player that can step up for them, and they don't have that. And I feel like they think they got that in PJ Washington, but in the long run, I believe this will just be another failed attempt at trying to get Luka a ring.
I think Lucky has a bit to say about the Mavericks.
I think in this trade deadline, we're going to see that there may have been good players out there like DeMar DeRozan, but what their asking price was way too high. And if you're the Mavericks, I completely agree with you. They need to make a trade for something better than PJ Washington, right? If you want to keep and retain Luka, because I do think he's thinking, in the future it may not be the best spot for him. But I feel like you have to make a move, right? And out of all the possible moves they could have made, I think this was actually a really good move for them because they're giving away Grant Williams, who is paid the exact same amount, does so much less, right? And PJ Washington, in their trade, they're giving away their first round pick this year. In 2027, right? And if Luka's still there, it's going to be a great, in the 20s. And they get back the Hornets 2024 and 2028 picks. Now, I don't know about the 2028 pick. That's a little too far. But 2024, that's going to be a really good pick. That's going to be in the 30s. So you're trading basically 10 spots down, if Luka stays with the Mavericks, and you're getting a way better player for the same amount of money in PJ Washington. But I agree with you completely. It's not enough to keep Luka to entice him to stay. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does and what the Mavericks continue to do.
Yeah, I feel like they could have given up just a tad bit more. I know the asking price for certain things around the league was high and that they had to do something, because if they didn't make a move, they would have been on everyone's losers list. But I firmly believe that this is a wait and see trade. This team could gel or it couldn't. And I like you said, I don't believe Luka will stay after this because Kyrie Irving he's a number two player. He's a number two player. He doesn't exactly, he can't lead a franchise like this, like he failed at the Celtics, failed at the Nets. But, it would just be interesting to see. It's a wait and see one, but for now I have it as a loss.
We've heard a lot about the Mavericks, so I'm going to bring it over to Julien for him to talk about his loser.
For me, the losers would have to be the Hawks. People kind of, maybe not forget, but DeJounte Murray was on the market pretty much the whole trade deadline. A lot of talks, nothing happened, right? I guess they didn't get what they want. There was talks with Siakam. Siakam didn't go there, but it's clearly not working. Trae Young is having a very good year, 27 and 11. They have some good young players too. In Jalen Johnson, as he's probably running right now for most improved player. And DeJounte Murray is just not what they thought they would get in him. He was a good defender. He's not a good defender anymore at all. He's subpar. If you look at advanced stats, Trae Young is technically a better defender. That is wild. That is wild. Trae Young is not a good defender, but he is, in advanced stats, better defender than DeJounte Murray. So, for me, they're the losers. They had to make a move. It's clearly not working, and Trae Young is probably going to end up leaving, in my opinion. I'm kind of surprised he didn't leave in the trade deadline.
Yeah, I was surprised about DeJounte. We heard rumors of him in the Spurs, which is a move I really liked. They have no point guards. I think he'd complement really well with a guy like Victor, who they're obviously trying to build their future around. But yeah, I would agree with you. Atlanta had a really weird deadline, I feel like.
I completely agree. I think DeJounte Murray's still riding off that all-defensive first team, and people really overestimate how impactful he is on a team with Trae Young. Like, he is a well-rounded point guard that does not much compared to what Trae Young does for that roster. And he's already got a relationship with Pop when he went to San Antonio as a rookie. So I feel like going to the San Antonio Spurs in that rebuilding team around Victor with nobody that likes to pass on that team, it would be a good move for simply DeJounte Murray's career.
That was another thing that I thought was weird about hearing rumors of DeJounte Murray to the Spurs, is that the Spurs gave him away at his peak value, and they would have gotten him back for less than they gave away. It would have been a fleece of a deal, but it didn't end up happening. And obviously, DeJounte Murray is still a Hawk with a Trae Young who seems to be a little upset about where his team is going. So I would like to pass it over to Lucky for his loser now.
So this is going to be pretty interesting because I didn't have a loser. I had a questionable move. And my questionable move was that of the Hornets. Because as I'm going to be reiterating some of the points I already said, but they basically got a first-round pick, which are like, oh, great, they got a first-round pick. But you look in the future, it's a 2027 first-round Mavericks pick, which is going to be in the 20s if they keep Luka, like I said. And they're trading 2 of their future seconds. And those are prime future seconds because if history dictates anything, they're not going to be good in the future. And you look at their roster, it's going to take a long time for them to be good. And so, you say, oh, well, PJ Washington, one of the few success stories that they've actually had at the Hornets, and they're trading him away, which is fine. Like, maybe he's not going to re-sign. Maybe he doesn't want to. But you're getting back Grant Williams, who, as I said, is, I think, overpaid. And you're getting him back, and he's, 25 years old, and he is what he is, I think, at this point. And you're basically going laterally with the draft capital, and you're giving up PJ Washington, like I said, one of the few success stories of the Hornets. So I think it's just really, I don't really get it. I think they could have done a better deal there.
Anybody else want to add to Lucky and his Hornets takes?
Believe it or not, I'm a fan of Grant Williams. Not a big one, like saying, oh, he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But I believe he is overpaid. I will give it that. For what they're paying for him, it's wrong. But if he had the right contract and I feel like the right situation, he could be a plus for any team. But it just depends, is the Charlotte Hornets that team?
Austin Terry, big Celtics fan. Obviously, Grant Williams spent some time there. We had another disgusted look on Julian's face, so I'm going to throw it to him.
For me, I just think that Grant Williams is still writing off whatever. I don't remember specifically. Maybe Austin, you could help me on this one. But that one playoff game where he dropped how many, like 30-ish points and got like 7-8 3-pointers.
Yeah, it was. I don't remember exactly, but I remember watching it. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
So yeah, for me, he's still writing off that game. His contract is based off that game because he played on the Mavericks. He wasn't that good of a shooter. For every game I watched, he wasn't a knockdown shooter at all, and that's what he needed to be. And like you said, the Hornets are most definitely not where he has to be. He would be, a good, solid role player on a contender, but the Hornets it's just like wasting years of his prime, I guess, if he's even in his prime.
Yeah, I guess this is his prime unless he makes a sudden change, but it like you said, a good player, a good role player on a contender, like he was on the Celtics. I enjoyed him on the Celtics. It proved in the end he wasn't exactly what we needed, and when he got dealt, I wasn't happy, but I wasn't sad about it. It was just one of those neutral things, like, oh, we lost Grant Williams, we lost Batman, but yeah, I don't think the Hornets are that team, and hopefully whenever his contract expires, I don't know when that is, or next trade deadline, that he does get moved to a right position. Because I like Grant. I hope he does well, but I don't think this is the move for him.
Yeah, that playoff game we were discussing, he dropped 27 points with 7 threes. So great game, but nothing to ride home about. for basing it off of his contract. I think Lucky has something else to add to that.
Well, I think that's something you see from, the Lakers and Celtics, really big fan bases, is they'll get attached to this player, and there's so many people in the media where they'll hear this and they'll say, oh, he's a great player. He's got so much value, right? Young guy, and you can see it reflected in, there's players like this all over the league, and there's role players, and they're going to go off for 30 once in a while. But because they have such a big market around them, the commentary and the debate around them is completely switched. And it's really interesting to see just like how hyped players like Grant Williams, once they leave that big market, how their market value completely craters.
Alrighty, so we've heard a bit about our losers. Now let's go on to some of the biggest surprises, which we've already discussed a little. But I know you all have your picks in, so let's throw it over to Cam.
How in the world did the OKC Thunder not trade one of their 15 first-round picks? Their background center right now is Bismack Biyombo, and they are first in the league with 15 first-round picks under their belt. What are they doing?
That was an interesting one, yeah.
Like, they have Chet Holmgren, for sure, who obviously looks like a star in the making. But 15 first-rounders in the next 6 years and not trading even one of them for a backup big man is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, going off the center thing, they have their 15 first rounders. I don't know how many of those are 24 first round picks, but 4 of them, Cam is saying, it's a weaker draft. You'd think they might try to give some of those away to get somebody more proficient at the center position than Bismack Biyombo, who I hold a little closer to my heart, and I'm sure Julien does too, as his time with the Raptors and his one playoff stretch where he was a block machine. But those long days are gone, and so I'm going to throw it over to Julien.
With the Thunder, it's maybe you could add on to this, Cam, but it's so confusing. Like, yes, they're the first seed. What happens when you face Jokic in the playoffs? Like, what happens? You don't have that.
Chet gets bullied. That's what's gonna happen.
Exactly. Like, he's a good shot blocker because he's 7. Like, his wingspan makes him insane. Like, 7'6"?
I want to say 7'8".
yeah. Like it's actually crazy. So
I think we
yes,
lucky with a fact check of this 7'6". 7'6".
So it's 7'6". Yes, he could shot block. Yes, I agree. But Jokic is a big body. He's the MVP, arguably the best player in the NBA. He's not gonna guard him to the best level. So for me, it's kind of odd that they didn't go and trade those first-round picks. Maybe there was some talks with the Raptors, with a Pearl off the bench. Pearl off the bench would be amazing. He's a good defender. He knows where to be, when to be there. So with them not trading one of their picks, very, very confusing for me.
And Lucky has a bit to add here.
So I'm just going to talk about the Raptors for a second here. I found my opportunity. Because people all over Twitter were saying, oh, I don't get what are the Raptors doing? Why are they making all these trades? And I don't think the Raptors made enough trades. I mean, they were sitting on their hands for about 3 seasons there, not making deals. And you have players like Gary Trent Jr., who, I don't know if his value is going to be recouped, but it hasn't really been good with Darko, right? And I think he did have something where we could trade him, maybe get a younger guy in where we can more develop him. And he's getting paid, I think 17? Around $17 million a year. And then we have Podol, who's 20. And so we have guys with big contracts, and we're not a good team. And we need to be, if we're hitting that reset button, we need to hit the reset button. And I know maybe Masai always loves to win all of his trades, and that's why he's very patient with his moves. But I do think, there was more guys to get rid of on this Raptors roster, and I just want to get value for them.
Just going on to the Raptors a bit. I didn't think they won the deadline, but I also didn't think they lost. They got rid of some big players pre-deadline, which I thought was really important. They gained guys like Kelly Olynyk, who's shooting 43% from the three-point line and can space the floor really well, while also getting rid of guys like Schroeder. But obviously they had more to get rid of, guys like Bruce Brown and, like you were saying, Gary Trent Jr. So let's just talk about that for a second as we're sitting here in Toronto.
Another contract they got to get rid of is Chris Boucher. He's making $11 million, and Bruce Brown, I don't mind keeping him because he's got a team option worth $22 million, I believe, at the end of the season, which Masai can decline. But Boucher, Trent, and Pirtle are all making over $10 million a year, and we do not need them on this team when we are going through a rebuild. And Pirtle, Olynyk fixes this, but Pearl clogging the paint is not doing anything for Barnes' improvement and development. Barnes is kind of like Doncic in a way where he needs the ball in his hands and an open paint to play with. And with Pirtle in there not creating any mismatches, it allows somebody to double team Barnes and prevent him from learning how to use his body and learning how to navigate the paint.
Over to you, Julien. I know I'm fairly in agreement with what you said, but I think maybe Julien has some more to add or discuss about that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Cam. The Raptors is, if we would have moved Pirtle, it would make sense, because now that we have a lot of contracts out with Schroeder, Otto, Thad, we could sign a guy this offseason like a Nick Claxton, right? Who's, I don't know what his contract, I don't know how much he would want to have, but I would sign him. Yes, okay, he would maybe clog the paint, but his defense just makes up for it. He's a great defender. We need a paint protector. Pirtle, he's good. He's like a Marc Gasol a bit. He's good. Like, he knows where to be on the floor, but he can't guard an Embiid or a Jokic because he's not athletic, you know?
You know, I'm sure we'd all love to talk about the Raptors here, but we did get a little off topic and we are a little short on time. So I'm going to throw it over to Austin to talk about his big surprise of the trade deadline.
As a Celtics fan, it gives me great joy to say, what were the Lakers doing? Nothing is the answer. But I genuinely believed there was a point in time where LeBron was on the move. I genuinely thought they were just going to scrap it and just start ground up again because, yeah, he won the in-season tournament, but it's a Mickey Mouse thing. It's not like their title is a Mickey Mouse thing. But I genuinely thought that they were going to go in hard for Zach LaVine because it's evident Lakers aren't going to win anything this year. So I thought maybe they're going to look for future years, and that's where I thought, hey, LeBron could be on his way out. But to do nothing, like, yeah, they got Dinwiddie afterwards, but Spencer Dinwiddie, you're not getting much out of that. And they are they're lagging behind, and they need to do something bad because Data Davis isn't the key to a championship anymore.
Yeah, we had a lot of laughs and a lot of nods in agreement in what you said. Calling a championship a Mickey Mouse is a hot take. I think some of us may agree with it, but I think I'm going to swing it over to Julien quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers are just, at this point, they're just wasting LeBron's years, and they're also wasting one of the AD's best seasons since probably the Pelicans. He's healthy. He's playing. How many games has he missed? Not a lot. I'm not sure the exact number. 0? Around, yeah. So it's like maybe less than 5. AD is playing. LeBron is playing. Austin Reeves is having a good season. Like, how are they even losing? They have to do something to make them better than a playing team. Yes, they could probably do a deep push because they have AD, they have LeBron, but they're just wasting years at this point.
Over to you, Cam.
In a trade deadline, there are rumors about LeBron leaving in the offseason to join his son. So I think the Lakers sold the bag on this. They could have made an addition to this team that could keep LeBron on the roster, but I think he wants to play with his son, man. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, that's a big deal. And I'm going to swing it over to Lucky here. Sorry, Austin.
I think Reeves is one of those players I was talking about earlier who gets hyped up because he's on the Lakers. You look around at the roster and you say, oh, they do have LeBron, they do have AD, right? They do have pieces there, but they're really lacking depth. And that is why I think what you guys are talking to is they did not make a deal. They did not make anything to add to their depth. And I think Austin Reeves has an inflated value because he plays for the Lakers. And I think they could have capitalized on that.
Also, maybe I'm thinking in Rob Pelinka's mind right now. Maybe he was like, okay, D'Lo is actually playing very well as of late, extremely well. He, the other day, torched the Raptors completely. He was insane. Really, really played well. And sorry, they didn't play the Raptors. Did they play the Raptors? I don't remember. I watched the Lakers game. I don't know why I thought it was the Raptors. He torched whatever team they played against. I'm sorry for the misinformation. But maybe he based himself off of that, but still, it's just wasting years. LeBron may be gone. Whoever's drafting Bronny, LeBron's going to be on that team maybe. So, you never know what the future is ahead of you. And I think Rob Pelinka completely fumbled the bag this this season.
We got to keep the pace going. So over to Lucky about his biggest surprise from the offseason. From the trade deadline.
All right, so the final most surprising trade for me is the Pacers giving up on Buddy Hield. Because I imagine the Pacers, they're a contending team this year. They're really good. They just added Siakam, right? And they're trading a three-point shooter, which, are so valuable in this league. You can never have enough three-point shooters. And Buddy Hield is a guy who used to average 20 points per league, points per game in the league. And I know he's having a down year, but why I don't understand why you're selling on a guy who can shoot threes the way Buddy Hield can for a team that is so importantly, like its ball movement, right? Get to the open shooter. Buddy Hield fits so perfectly with their scheme, and you're trading him away for Doug McDermott, Furkan Korkmaz. I don't think he plays anymore, and 2 second-round picks, right? And cash considerations, I guess. I don't know if they can spot in the corner or not. Cash considerations, but I don't think so. So it's really, I don't understand why a contending team like the Pacers would give up on a player like Buddy Hield for 2 second-round picks.
A lot of nods in agreement with what Lucky Roberts is saying. So for our last section, we're going to be talking about what trades that you suspected to happen didn't go down. And we've already touched on this a bit, but to do this one a little differently, I'm not going to throw it to anybody. I'm going to see whoever raises their hand first, and we're just going to start the discussion here, and that's going over to Austin Terry.
I said this when talking about the Lakers, but I genuinely thought they were going to give up something for Zach LaVine but I think either, I don't know if it was LeBron that stopped the trade or someone else, but I firmly believe he could have been a great centerpiece for them in future years, and it would have been a great fit for both parties because, like we said earlier, the Bulls needed to make a trade and they didn't. But because LaVine's out for the season, that would have just been the Lakers admitting, hey, we're done for this year. There's no shot that we're doing anything. But I don't think they're ready to do that. So.
Over to you, Lucky.
Yeah, I think I'm in total agreement. I think something that was coming out of the Bulls camp was that they were asking way too much for LaVine, right? And I understand why they would, because they've basically wasted their last 3 years on him. They better get something, and that's what the fans are saying. And I think that's partly why we see the Bulls not making a move, is because they're afraid that if they do, they're not going to get enough for their fans, and they're going to get fired. But I think that's happening already. The important thing is, what were they asking for from the Lakers? And what did the Lakers have to give? Because I know they've spent a lot of their first-round picks. So were they asking for Reeves and some of the depth? Because if they were, I don't know if the Lakers had any depth else to give.
Yeah, they were probably asking for the majority of the young core of the Lakers, and they weren't willing to give that up. And because they've already spent their first-round picks, they couldn't reach an agreement, which is bad for both teams. It would have been a great trade to see go down.
Yeah, I think the Lakers it would have benefited from LaVine. I think the Bulls would have also benefited from him giving them away. But I think clearly the Bulls were probably asking for too much, and obviously you need depth to still be able to win, and especially win a championship. So over to somebody new about a trade you thought that would go down but didn't end up happening, and that is Cam.
Okay, an easy one would be like Bruce Brown to the Knicks, because it's been talked about since Bruce Brown came to Toronto. But as I said before, Thunder were looking for a big man. I feel like they easily could have traded to a rebuilding team, maybe go for an Isaiah Stewart off Detroit, or maybe a Mo Wagner from Orlando with one of those 15 picks. And that would have helped out a lot on their bench depth and really got them ready for a playoff season. And now, unless they make a small free agency signing to fix a weakness very minimally, they're going into the playoff season with their centers being Chet Holmgren and Bismack Biyombo, and they are a top seed in the West. I don't know how that's going to pan out against the Nuggets or the Clippers.
Over to you, Lucky.
Just a quick thing, because you guys were talking about it earlier, and you were saying, they could have gone for Podol, but I think this new age of NBA player doesn't really fit well with Podol. And the thing that they want to do is they don't want to have the clogging in the paint for SGA and for all their players. Chet Holmgren, I think, is the future, right? And so do you adapt or do you not, or do you go back to the past? And I think adapting and trying to teach Chet and trying to get him bigger, buff him up, will be beneficial for Chet in the long run, because having that experience against some of the tougher bigs in the NBA will make him stronger for future playoff runs that they have. I do think, though, this might not be the year because they didn't make a move. And I agree with you. If they were chasing a championship, then that's the move they should have made.
Alrighty, so we've talked about our winners, our losers, our biggest surprise, and what trades that you suspected to happen but didn't go down. So now, just to wrap things up, I think we should all go in a circle and say whose takes changed your opinion the most, or whose takes you thought were the best in the end. So I'm going to start with myself. I think I agreed the most with Lucky. I think he had a lot of good opinions about what was going on. Next, I'm going to ask you, Cam.
I didn't realize this as it happened, but I liked Austin's take on the Mavericks PJ Washington deal. Luka is going to leave if they don't put a team around him, just like LeBron did to Miami. And they're going to be kicking themselves when Luka wins several MVPs throughout his career and wasted a trade deadline on PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, who won't help as much as they need him to do.
Yeah, leaving Luka is a quite awful future for the Mavericks. It's a scary future. Over to you, Austin.
Returning the favor actually it was Cam and the Bismack Biyombo thing. Well, the OKC thing, but it seemed like it was primarily focused on Bismack. But I mean, yeah, they needed to do something to fill that center position, and they didn't. And I agreed wholeheartedly. Couldn't say the same with Julian's takes, unfortunately, but it's so Cam's the one I gotta go with.
Yeah, having 4 first-round picks this in a losing draft or a not as good draft and not trading them away to try to get a better backup center it's a bit surprising. So I'm gonna go over to Julien now.
I think because we think with our Raptors minds, I would have to agree with Lucky the most. I think, we talked about a lot about how the Raptors, about what they did, but also I think he agreed with me on the Grant Williams take that I had, and also with the Hawks. And for Austin, well, man, I love you, man, still love you, but I have to disagree with everything you said.
I love you too, man. And finally, over to Lucky.
I think I didn't really come into this thing about trades that didn't happen. I was mostly looking at the trades that did. But hearing Cam talk about the Bulls and Julien talk about the Hawks and just what entirely those organizations are doing really is something that hit home with me and that I completely agreed with, because it is extremely confusing, why they're not doing anything in these trade deadlines.
Alrighty, guys, let's all turn on our mics and, back up a bit and give a quick round of applause. Thank you for joining us today on the Shutter Sports Podcast. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts, and don't be shy to join us in the discussion on any platforms at Shutter Sports Media. Until next time, I'm Eli Pearl, joined by
Cam Stirling,
Austin Terry,
Julien Rose,
And Lucky Roberts.
and this has been the Shutter Sports Podcast.